Hello and welcome to Cloudforest Vibes. My name's Bobby, and this is how I grow orchids and carnivorous plants. Hello and welcome to Cloudforest Vibes. I was just in the tent poking around, and there is a lot of stuff going on. The change of seasons is rapidly occurring, and the plants are really starting to react. So we're just going to have another little poke around, look at some things, talk about some things, and there are some new blooms to share with you guys, so I will be doing that as well. I'm still waiting on quite a few buds and stuff to open, so this isn't going to be a bloom focused video per se, but you're definitely going to see a couple. Most of the things that we're going to look at in here are based off of growth and progress and things like that. So we're going to go ahead and get in here and take a peek at some really cool things, and some orchids and some carnivorous plants. Actually, there's some carnivorous plant news, so I will be sharing that with you as well. Anyhow, here we go. So I figured we would go ahead and just start with our new blooms and get them out of the way. This is Speccolinia picta GG, and we have been waiting to see these little dainty blooms open for the last week or so, and they are finally open. Little and weird. Let me go ahead and see if I can zoom in a bit better. That's it, that's all you get. They're little and they're weird. If you know me, you know that's kind of my thing. But there are tons and tons of them. The one spike blasted, it did not do anything down here, unfortunately, but we do have 4 spikes just full of little blooms everywhere. They've got a nice little red tinge to them. Otherwise, they're kind of a palish green, almost a white, and they really are lovely. Cool little blooms on an even cooler little plant. So the next plant that we're going to look at hangs just to the left, right here. This is Encyclia bractescens. My history with this plant is a bit checkered. I got this stick mounted from Andes about 2.5 years ago. Actually 3 years ago. This was one of my very first species orchids that I ever bought. I think the polybulbin and this were the very first two. So I've had this plant potted before. It did terrible in my environment. It really didn't grow very much. It was suffering from a lot of rot. The whole bottom section of this plant used to be a lot more full, and it died off. Last year it recovered a bit. It grew a new growth or two, and they did pretty well. Last fall, this thing shot out in 3 different directions, and it is finally kind of in stride. Hang it up here so we can zoom in a bit. The plant is growing all sorts of new growths. 1, 2, 3 down here, and all sorts of roots, which is even more important because the entire life of this plant, it has been very, very, very lacking and very sad in the root department. So we're finally getting there. As I said, it hangs up here with its back to the window. For the first little while, I had it growing over in this cluttered little section down here with a bunch of these other plants that like this moderate light level, and it started to just get too shaded, so I moved it up, and I moved it directly under one of my LED grow lights, and it has been doing absolutely outstanding ever since. The proof is in the pudding, I guess, but I am very excited to see what happens with this plant, and I hope it's getting enough light to bloom, because I sacrificed the spike last year and we did not get to see these blooms. I was trying to put strength back into the plant, and I would say just by the amount of growth that it's pushing right now and that it has pushed over the last few months, that it was actually successful. So we've got a lot of strength back into this orchid, and I really am excited to see what happens with it here in the near future this season. Something that's often overlooked in my collection, we've been looking all around it, we may as well take a peek at that. This is my Phalaenopsis Parishi, and this little thing actually has 2 spikes on right now. We had 2 spikes last year. We had a really good showing. I was extremely impressed and extremely happy about it. And it's grown a really nice little new leaf there last year, but also this little wimpy one. So I was very concerned to see what's going to happen with this. I may sacrifice one of these spikes so this plant doesn't drain itself of energy, because I think that might be what happened last year. But we've had some root growth, and we have some root growth on this plant right now. So that does make me hopeful that it will be able to sustain itself a little bit better this year. I'm going to make sure I keep it moist. It is one that likes to grow rather moist, and it lives here behind the window again, so it gets a lot of bright indirect light, but it does not get really any sunlight whatsoever. So it seems happy there, it does really well, and we're going to keep it that way. Over to the right, on this same wall, I have this plant. This is my Lepanthes auriculata. This used to live down in the depths down here in the very, very, very shaded area. That is my Dracula and other super shady loving spot. But it really didn't do that great down there. You see these little leaves here? This is what it produced for me last year, and this is the size that they should be. So I'm hoping that moving it up here, giving it more light, is going to be the ticket. And I can already tell you that since the weather started to warm up a bit, it is already starting to react. We've got a new growth here, we've got a new growth here, 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 3 or 4 more coming down there. I mean, this thing is absolutely just flooded with new growths. So this plant is effectively right now in the process of doubling in size, which is very exciting. So I'm hoping that the leaves come out and the growths come out larger and larger until they get back up to this size, and then we know we'll have a really healthy, happy plant. I'm hoping to see some real good root growth come on this thing this year. That's the one thing it really is kind of lacking. I haven't seen a whole lot of new roots come on this plant since I have remounted it, but that's okay. All these new growths are going to result in new roots eventually. So that is very exciting news, and lots of progress on our Lepanthes auriculata. So, other news in the Lepanthes world, this is my Lepanthes gargoyla. This plant came in the tent this winter to live so we could get some cooler temps, because it is one of the more cooler appreciating ones that I have. I think it is a true intermediate grower, but I do bring it in here again in the winter because it gets cooler in my tent in the winter time than it does in my tank, believe it or not. So what's happened? What is the progress here? I will show you. Oh, let me probably zoom back in for that, huh? Alrighty, so nothing. Not a single flower spike, not a single bloom. The keikis are back. Keikis everywhere, if you can see that. Keikis everywhere. And lots of little new growths. Oh, down at the base. All the little green specks that you see in the base of this plant are new growths. So this plant is growing in a frenzy right now that the seasons are changing. So what I'm going to do with this plant is leave it right where it's at. I think instead of putting this back in the tank, I think what I'm going to do is leave it here at least for a little while, unless I see signs of stress or damage from the heat, through the spring, and wait until the heat of the summer to take it out of the tent and put it back in the tank. I'd like to see what happens with these new growths. I'd like to see if the swing in temperatures or the day length or something perhaps triggers them to get to their full potential size and do better, because it has before in my care. I'm not sure if perhaps it needs a upgrade with the moss or something like that, so I'm going to do that as well here soon and try to provoke it to do better. But that is my Lepanthes gargoyla, and that is how it's doing. It is a healthy plant. I mean, really nice little plant, but it is very reluctant to bloom for me. So we'll keep an eye on this one. We'll monitor this one. This is the only other Lepanthes that lives in here besides the auriculata, at least for this moment. And yeah, we'll just use this one as kind of an experiment and see. My little Bulbophyllum tentaculiferum down here, its bloom is already gone. I filmed this for my shorts like 2 days ago when it opened, and I must say, it must be the rising temperatures or something, but it is absolutely gone. and so are 98% of these spikes. 1, 2, 3 spikes left that might actually do something, but I can count at least 8 or 9 of them that have blasted, which is a shame, but I am still happy that we had some success with this plant this year, because in the past all I have done is blast buds. So hopefully a couple of these little guys will hang in there for us and we'll get to see 1 or 2 more blooms if we're really lucky, but I wouldn't hold my breath. This thing is going back to live in the tank very, very, very soon. I haven't had a high temperature in my tent yet, above 76 degrees, and this thing is already suffering, if that tells you anything. So it needs to go live where the temperature will absolutely never exceed that. Let's see, I've got this little guy here. This is my Dendrobium aberrans, and I got this from Andy's last year. I ripped it off the stick immediately. It pushed out 1 little new growth for me last year, and this year, right under it, it has already started to form a new growth here. So it is doing well. I've moved it up. It was living down there in the depths last year, and I think that it would appreciate a little bit more light. So that's what we've been giving it, and we've been rewarded already with this awesome, strong new growth. I'm hoping to see more. I'm hoping this thing will push up multiple growths this year and really start to take off. I would love to see the blooms on this plant, but I'm not holding my breath. I don't think it's going to happen this year. I think it is still too young of a plant for that. I have another Dendrobium that we hardly ever look at, and I'm going to go ahead and get that out now. This is my little Dendrobium tetragonum. Daryl Adams had actually suggested that I look at JNL orchids, and I have actually bought this one plant from them. It is awesome, a really nice little plant. They have some really nice plants on their website, but I have only bought this one from them so far. They have a few Dendrobiums that I have been looking at, and a couple Oncidium species as well, but I have yet to pull the trigger. We had some success last year. Let me hang this up. We had this new growth last year. We had this new growth last year. It is pushing up. Oh, I'm sorry. This is already, I apologize. So we had this new growth last year, and we had this new growth last year. This is the growth that's already pushing up from this year so far, and it's strong. I am excited about that, and we do have another little one down here. It is not so strong. I don't know what that's going to do. I doubt this is going to make it to full size, but it's there. So the plant is growing. I'm waiting to see something come off of this strong cane from last year, but nothing yet. And again, this is a seedling for sure. Young plant. I doubt we're going to see blooms on this thing this year, even though I would love to, but I am excited nonetheless to have this in my collection and have a chance to grow it on. I grow it pretty moist. I do let it dry out between waterings, but the zombie moss has started to reanimate and come back alive. That is just what it does. So that is why it's all green. It does seem to like it. Some of the roots grow up the bark, and some of the roots grow down into the moss and do all right for the most part. But that's that. So that is my Dendrobium tetragonum, and it is doing pretty well so far this season. Can't wait to see what this orchid does. So here we have one of my Oncidium type species. This is Gomessa varicosa var Felicio Valdino. I got this from Equigenera 2.5 years ago with my very first Equigenera order that I ever put out, and it was a very sad rootless plant at the time. I knew by the way it was climbing when I got it that it needed to go on a mount, and I've put it on this mount which desperately needs the moss freshened up and probably some more moss added to it, because this plant has grown several growths for me and they keep getting bigger and better, and it has a new growth, a really strong new growth pushing on right now. But I don't know if you'll notice or not, this plant does not have any spikes or anything on it. It has never ever bloomed. I don't know if it's my cultural conditions or whatever. Perhaps it wasn't happy enough before, but I'd say that it's probably getting close to blooming size now, and it should be blooming. It's got a nice root system now, Some of them are going aerial. Again, I need to tend to that and freshen up this moss a bit. I'm going to keep it on this mount. It really, really likes it, but I don't know, it just doesn't want to bloom. One of my most frustrating non-bloomers. The first time I ever saw this plant was on Roger's channel. He has the Rogersi or whatever, of the Oncidium varicosum. But this is just a beautiful flower. It's yellow and black, dancing lady type, and I have always wanted to see it in the flesh. So I have the plant. It is doing pretty well, but again, no blooms again this year. It lives down here with some of my other Oncidium and, let's see, Encyclia types and Dendrobiums as well, where they get really decent light, but I'm not sure what is really going on with that and why it won't do it. This is my Angraecum leonis. I put this on a mount, but it sits flat on my bench over there right in the window, and I don't know what is going on with this plant. It has some sort of damage to it. I don't know if it's cold damage or light damage. I do not know what. It seems happy. The new growth is not that way. I think it might have just gotten too cool, but I need to get that figured out because that is ugly. That growth is mine from last year, and over the winter it just started to get whatever it's got. The moss here does dry out in between waterings. I know this thing likes to stay a little bit more moist than that, so I need to maybe be better about that. Perhaps it's getting too much light in the window in the winter time. I do pull the shade cloth back, but it really didn't affect this new growth, so I don't know if that's the case. Roger's got that issue with the his leaves and some of the spotting, giving it water that's the wrong temperature and it damaging cell tissue. I'm not sure if this is that. It could be as well. But either way, I would like to get it sorted out because I, A, want to see this plant bloom and be happy, and B, cannot stand looking at it. Look how ugly that is. So anyway, that's my Angraecum leonis. Seldom seen, or well, seldom talked about, but it is doing well for the most part except for this issue. Hopefully we can get that figured out and we do not perpetuate it any longer, because I do not want that to start happening to the newest growth here. This little Bulbophyllum species that I got from Andes, it is Bulbophyllum species section bractescens. Oh my god, I'm gonna butcher it. I'll put it up on the screen. Mini repens. Interesting little bulbo. It's one that likes a wet-dry cycle, and it does not have your formal pseudobulbs. The foliage and the bulbs are kind of one. It has very succulent leaves, and it grows in these little leads, rhizomes with a clumping kind of nature to it. It has put on lots of growth since I got it. It is doing really, really well for the most part. Lots of roots, but no blooms. I had it living back here in a bright indirect light section next to a bunch of other plants, but this year I am going to make a change. I've already moved it over here with my Cattleyas and my Tolumnias because this is a very bright loving Bulbophyllum species. So we're going to see if some morning sunlight doesn't do this thing wonders. I would love to see it push on better roots and bigger growths, and I would absolutely kill to see this bloom because it's got a really weird flower. Looks like the type that stinks, so I'm not looking forward to that necessarily, but I love my bulbos and I really want to see this weird little thing bloom. What a weirdo. Like I said, I have that thing living down here next to some Tolumnias and some of my Cattleya types. And speaking of that, this is one of my Lelias that I got last year. This is Lelia pumila, and it did really, really well. It pushed on these two growths last year that are just big, and they're bad, they're happy. They're at least the size of the ones before it, if not bigger for some of them. I cut some of the back of this plant off, but it does seem like it's pushing out more eyes, so I think we're going to get more growth from it this year. No sheaths, no signs of blooming, even though this leaf just cracked. I do not see anything down in there, but it's okay. I am happy. It's pushed out a bunch of roots. The roots are in growth right now. I've got lots of tips all over this thing, and I'm just hoping that they take over this little mount and that this plant gets happy and perhaps blooms for us next year. I've got lots and lots of other Cattleya types that are doing well. This is the Laelia Diana. It's forming some roots, which is good because it needs it, but I am still waiting to see the new growth. It has an eye pushing, but it is not really growing yet. Huge news though in the Cattleya world. This is my Sophronites manticurea. This was in bloom this was in bloom in the winter of last year. I'll throw up a picture because this bloom is absolutely breathtaking. One of my favorites that I've managed to come up with so far. And the most exciting news of all in relations to this plant is not only, get off of there, not only do we have one new growth here, but if you look at the top, well, my hand doesn't ruin the shot. If you look deep down in there, you'll see a little purple speck above that pseudobulb, and that is another new growth. So we are not only going to have one, but we are going to have a second direction of growth from our manticurea, which means that we could have not only one, but two flowers on it this coming year, which is awesome news, considering they're so beautiful, as you saw. The Sophronites cernua, Cattleya cernua, if you will, has tons and tons of new growth starting on it down here. It's got a few on this side as well starting, and lots of new roots. This is a very young plant. Again, it is very small. I got this from Hauserman. This will be my second season with it, I think. I've had this for year and a half already, and it's doing well, but again, I just cannot wait to see this thing get mature enough to bloom. The blooms evade me, guys. I got the one here from Andy's that's more mature. I unmounted it, remounted it, but it's not doing anything at the moment. I think I angered the orchid gods with that one. I did not wait for new growths or new roots or anything. I just kind of got it off of its stick right away because I knew that it was not going to do well on there long term, and I didn't want anything bad to happen. Having that said, we'll keep an eye on that one as well, and our other cernua down here throughout this growing season, and give you updates because I cannot wait for one of them to do something. I have a feeling that this one, even though it's in worse shape and smaller, is going to be the first one to bloom over this little guy, but we will see. Hopefully I am wrong. Now this plant here is my Dendrobium rotostictum, and as you can see, it has been growing pretty well throughout the winter. What I don't understand is this plant has not even attempted one single spike since the one flower I had the year after I rescued it. It has grown big, bad, healthy growths. It's got more new growths coming. It's got a decent root system that's formed. The roots do seem to stay alive. I water this thing a lot. I keep it moist. I let it dry gently between waterings. It never gets too hot. It doesn't really get too cold. It should be a perfectly happy plant. I'm thinking it's a light issue. I think if you look at these leaves, they're a little dark. They are not as light as they should be. This one kind of hangs out further where it lives over here, and it's gotten some more light, and I think you can really tell the difference between the color of that and the color of the ones back here. So the Maxillaria tenuifolia and the Braccia strike again in overshading another plant. So I am avidly working on ways to remedy that situation, but this plant is going to be moving in the near future in order for it to get more light, because it just has to bloom. I absolutely have to see these blooms again. This is another must-have plant in my collection. I got it because, again, I think I saw it the first time on Roger's Orchids and just had to have this one. Pretty easy to grow. It doesn't like to get too cold. It doesn't like to get too hot. It's a real true intermediate grower again, but it is a pretty easy grower if you can supply it with enough humidity and light to be happy. I would like to say that this new little Dendrobium Myanmar species here is struggling just a little bit. I have it mounted here. Not sure what's going on. It was plumping up a little bit. I gave it a little bit of water. Maybe it's time. It needs another water. It's bone dry. I do not see any roots growing. No signs of new growths yet, but I do have it in a relatively bright spot. I have it living up here above this circulating fan, you know, just behind the window in the shade cloth. So I'm just waiting for the sun and the warmer temperatures to kick this thing off and hopefully make it happy enough to grow again, because what a neat little plant this will be. The other Dendrobiums are doing really well. We won't look at them all, but I will look at this with you guys. The Dendrobium unicum is really starting to come along nicely. It's showing its buds now. We're going to have at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, yeah, 10 or so, maybe a dozen if we're lucky. And the new growth is pushing on fast. So that's a good sign. I would love to see this plant push out a second lead, but beggars can't be choosers. It is still an awesome plant and I'm super happy about it. Now, I did say that before we stepped out of here, we were going to look at some carnivorous plants. So let me go ahead and pull these guys out. This is my little Drosera prolifera with the little Drosera binata hitchhiker. And through the winter, it has kind of gone semi-dormant. It really didn't do that great until the day length started to get a little bit longer. These little binatas started to shoot up all of a sudden all over the place again, and the growths on this have become bigger and better than ever. Really, really neat plant, covered in dew. I don't know if you can see it, but yeah, there you go, look at that. Just covered in dew and stickiness and mopping up the beginnings of the spring fungus gnats. Yes, they are back. Something very special though is this little flower. This thing is in bud / bloom right now. The flower is actually starting to close, but it is a neat little one, and it's got 4 or 5 more to come. So I will be sure to share the next bloom with you. I just noticed this today when I was checking this to see if it needed water. But that is Drosera prolifera, and that is Drosera binata. Awesome little plants. I do need to expand my carnivorous plant selection this year. I need to get some more pinguiculas. I need to get some more Drosera and things like that, because they really do an awesome job with the fungus gnats, and I love them. They really are cool little plants, easy to grow. I just stick them down here in the window. I do need to get them more light. I know that will give them better color, but for now, I mean, look at all the little divisions. I'm going to have a video soon, some upkeep, some repotting, and things like that. This is going to get split. My capensis down here, this thing is actually doing awesome. I thought I was going to lose this plant at one point in time, and it has decided to come back with a vengeance this fall and winter so far. So hopefully it stays good through the springtime and I can keep it happy, because it really, really did suffer and do poorly in the summertime. But I guess that's kind of what it does. I guess it goes dormant and then comes back. So that's that. But as you see, it has gotten big and bad again. I am extremely excited to say that I kept this alive. I really did think this thing was dead at one point in time. So that's that. I guess I can move that Lepanthes in here and show you guys that, but I think we're going to do that in a separate video actually, because it is so large and so unruly. I really do have a hard time filming it anywhere, no less in this cramped little grow tent, which it is absolutely starting to take over. I have broken some orchids because of it. I've broken some of its new pictures off because it just doesn't fit anywhere. It is just a beast, so gonna have to tend to that soon. And I don't know, maybe some of you carnivorous plant lovers and fans out there, you guys might end up getting divisions of it, because I do not know what else to do, and I want it to go to a good home because I love the plant. It's just getting too much for this little tent. So anyhow, let's go take a look at one thing in the tank before we leave that is very special, and then we will close this video out on that note, because it is definitely worthy. I hope you guys aren't sick of looking at this plant yet, because I'm sure not, and we're going to keep looking at this thing until all these blooms fall off. This is Masdevallia exquisita. We have seen this a few times already. It had just opened up its third flower the last time we looked at it, and I am pleased to say that we actually made it, and it now has 4 flowers on. What a spectacle this thing is. Right here in the front of the tank. You know, it's the first thing you see as you're looking in right now, along with the Cuthbertsonii. And then you've got the little Patriciana behind it, which is just an adorable little Masdevallia as well. Just kind of complementing the awesome of this. And that's it, guys, for today. That's my video. I do hope you enjoy, as always. And until next time, please stay safe and happy growing.